Reimagining the Divine, A Celtic Spirituality of Experience by Dara Molloy. Poetry by Tess Harper Molloy and Shalane Harkin. The text is read by the author. The poetry is read by Tess Harper Molloy. The harp playing is by Anu Molloy. You can continue the conversation by subscribing to the Aisling newsletter at www.aislingpublications.com. That's Aisling spelt A-I-S-L-I-N-G, aislingpublications.com. I'm also available for online group conversations, book clubs, church gatherings and podcasts. My email is daramolloy@me.com. That's DARAMOLLOY @me.com. Introduction. I live in a country where religious practices have changed utterly within my lifetime. Churches have emptied out. Seminaries have stopped producing priests. Nuns and brothers have disappeared from our streets, our schools, and our hospitals. In the space of half a century, the bulk of the Irish Catholic population has shifted from being orthodox, loyal, and church-going to being shocked, alienated, disillusioned, and no longer church-going. While the lowest point may have yet to come, that church's highest point was not too long ago. It came in 1979. The moment was the visit to Ireland of Pope John Paul II. During that visit, a total of 3.5 million people attended the events, representing 70% of the population of the Republic. It was a case of the higher you rise, the harder you fall. On that occasion, I attended an event in Galway with a busload of teenagers from our prayer group in Dundalk. We joined 300,000 other youth from all over the country. Those youth were enthusiastic, participant members of the Catholic Church at that time. I'm sure the Pope and other clergy in attendance believed that these young people would be active and loyal members of this church throughout their lives. But looking back over that visit, the rot had already set in, even though it was not yet visible. On the platform with the Pope, at the Galway event, were two national celebrities, Bishop Eamon Casey and Father Michael Cleary, both popular among the youth. Years later, they were both disgraced when it was revealed they had secretly fathered children. These scandals were mild compared to the church scandals that were to follow. From that first shockwave breaking of Bishop Eamon Casey in 1992, wave after wave of further revelations has hit our shores. One scandal after another, each more shocking than the last. We've had stories of the abuse of Borstal boys in places such as Letterfrack, the abuse of young women in Magdalen laundries, and the abuse of mothers and their children in mother and baby homes. And of course, similar revelations have occurred worldwide. The fallout from this collapse has been spectacular. Ireland quickly shifted from being a conservative, church-dominated society to being one of the most liberal, secular and pluralist societies in the Western world. During this shift, referendums were held which made changes to the Irish Constitution. These changes decriminalised homosexuality, introduced divorce, permitted abortions, and recognised gay marriages. The Catholic Church was sidelined and stripped of its authoritarian hold on the people. This collapse, however, has led to a vacuum. I see it every day in my work as a celebrant and a pilgrim guide. Young adults whose parents reared them as Catholic balk at the idea of getting married in a church. They want a spiritual ceremony, but outside of religion. Their spirituality is not well defined or developed, and so they search around hoping to find something that resonates with them. Later, they have children, but hesitate at the idea of baptizing them or putting them forward for First Communion and confirmation. They search for alternatives. But what or where are the alternatives? They're not easily found. This situation is true not just in Ireland, but in many other countries. From my work with pilgrim groups, I find that there is a general discontent across the Christian denominations, even among the clergy. Many of the pilgrim groups I meet are church connected. They come mainly from the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and various European countries. The issues they have with their church generally relate to authority structures, the role and treatment of women, the inadequacy of the liturgy, and the stifling nature of the theology. I also cater for groups or individuals who are not church-related and who often describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. I get the impression that this cohort is growing exponentially in many countries at present. On a positive note, the common threads in these groups is their interest in spirituality over religion, and often specifically in Celtic spirituality. I have something in common with these people. I too have felt this discomfort with the church institution. I too have been attracted to Celtic spirituality. I too am searching for new ways to understand the divine and new ways to celebrate and ritualize the sacred moments in our lives. If clergy leave their role within an institutional church but wish to continue with equivalent work in a healthier, more supportive and creative environment, where do they go? I faced that problem myself in 1996 when I chose to leave the Catholic Church but to remain a priest. People asked, "How will you do this? How can you be a priest without a church structure, a church building, a parish, a bishop?" My answer was that I didn't know, but I was going to find out. I have since found out that it is very possible to act as a priest without these institutional or material structures. I offer a service to people, and if they want it, they respond. It is that simple. My services correspond to most of the roles I had as a Catholic priest, but I now offer these services without the Catholic baggage and with input from our own Celtic spiritual tradition, both pre-Christian and Christian. I am free, in collaboration with those I serve, to be creative, inclusive, and relevant in the ceremonies I perform. This book is for people who feel, like me, that they are on a spiritual journey but have not yet arrived. They are searching. The old ways no longer appeal or resonate, but the new ways have yet to be clarified. Lying ahead on the immediate horizon is the existential and apocalyptic threat of climate change and biodiversity loss. Our traditional religious beliefs and church institutions are not adequate to deal with these threats and are even contributing to their cause. But it is not just our religious beliefs, but also our lifestyles, our ways of being in the world that are now in question. All the systems and institutions we are familiar with, economic, educational, health, housing, transport, must change and adapt to this new oncoming existential threat. This situation can be frightening, but it can also be energizing. Old, encrusted and embedded ways are now breaking up. The ice melting, while alarming as a physical reality on our planet, is symbolic of this loosening up and of energy beginning to flow again. The future is full of possibilities for creativity and imagination. The challenges can be felt as invigorating. The wisdom of the ancients teaches us that we must face and embrace our fear and not act out of it. We live best in these threatening circumstances when we exercise our faith, our hope, and our love. By faith here, I do not mean the creeds of our traditional religions, but a confidence in life itself and in its purposeful evolution. Within us, there are the seeds of our own healing and salvation, as well as that of the earth and all its other species. The challenge now is to dig deep, to be willing to grow and change, and to embrace the future receptively and even enthusiastically. I believe that Celtic spirituality can help us do this. It has been part of my life in a focused way since 1985. The metaphor that I use most to describe my experience of it is the treasure in the field. However, I would now say, after over 30 years of searching, that this field has multiple treasures. I have found some of these treasures, but there are a lot more. This makes the journey exciting and adventuresome. Therefore, while the first part of this book looks at the inadequacies and distortions of the Father God image of the divine, the dysfunctional institutions that grew out of that image, and how this has affected our society and our ways of thinking, another substantial part of this book outlines where we can go if we choose to leave this all behind. Celtic spirituality has the potential to fill the vacuum for many people. This spirituality has not been institutionalized. It does not require belief in a creed, nor is it prescriptive in issuing commandments. What Celtic spirituality does offer is a way of experiencing the divine in everything. Through learning about Celtic spirituality and then practicing it, we can begin to recognize the sacred in our midst. We can not only recognize it with our minds, but experience it in our bodies. Celtic spirituality also uniquely offers us a way of integrating the understanding and love we may have for Jesus into that spiritual practice. Celtic spirituality has a Christian dimension. The Celtic spiritual tradition, both pagan and Christian, offers us a path for personal growth, for discovering our true destiny, and for the fulfillment of our potential as humans. It reflects the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "If you want to change the world, be that change you want to see." Change will come through each of us improving our own lives, being true to who we are, and reaching our full potential. We will be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, as indeed Celtic monks were during Ireland's Golden Age in the 7th and 8th centuries CE. Celtic monasticism offers a formula for community that is inclusive, tolerant, and non-hierarchical. These monasteries focused on living according to an inspirational vision, first enunciated by their founders, They were intentionally limited in size so as not to become institutionalized. Finally, Celtic spirituality is a spirituality very suited to tackling the climate and biodiversity crises. It puts the sacred back in nature and invites us to experience the divine in the presence of all living species. That sense of a sacred presence will motivate us to change our lifestyles and our habits, to live more in harmony with nature and with other living species. We will work together to create the best possible future on this planet for all to survive and thrive. Chapter 1. Does Holy God exist? A quotation from Albert Einstein. Try and penetrate with our limited means the secrets of nature, and you will find that behind all the discernible concatenations there remains something subtle, intangible, and inexplicable. Veneration for this force, beyond anything we can comprehend, is my religion. End of quote. Here in Ireland, God is an everyday word. I will hear it many times a day. It's part of everyday banter to say, thank God, or please God, or some other such phrase. I hear the word God used in conversation on national and local radio all the time. We take this God for granted in our lives. In recent years, the acronym OMG, for Oh My God, has taken a firm hold on social media. Do we really believe in this God? Or are we just following convention? It is almost impossible for me not to refer to God in conversation. This is especially true when I speak Gaelic, as I often do. The Gaelic for hello is Diarit, meaning God be with you. Conversations in Gaelic are peppered with God references, blessings, and invocations. When I was about 12 years of age, I used to lie in bed at night wondering about my future before falling asleep. I tossed and turned with the question, does Holy God exist? I figured that if Holy God did exist, then I should spend my life in His service. Each night I struggled. Eventually I decided, Holy God exists. That set me on a path. My life became an unfurling of the consequences of that decision. I started attending Mass every day with my father. Later, when I finished schooling, I entered the seminary and began studying for the Catholic priesthood. My decision to believe had fundamental implications for my life. My belief in this Holy God continued into my Catholic priesthood. I lived with my belief without questioning until I was 47 years of age. That was the point where everything changed utterly and irrevocably for me. In 1996, my 47th year, I left the Catholic Church. Leaving the Church was as big a decision as that in my childhood of choosing to believe in God. It had huge implications for the rest of my life. It was because of the Church's authoritarian and patriarchal behaviour that I left the Church, not because of my religious beliefs. I experienced the Church as dictatorial and male-dominated. My exit, however, gave me the freedom to think outside the box. I no longer had to be orthodox. My previous certainties became something I questioned. I began to question God. This new questioning was not, does Holy God exist? But, how can we know this God exists? If there is something out there, it is mysterious. We experience it, but yet we cannot see, hear, smell, touch, or taste it. We can only imagine it. If I imagine a God, then I create an image in my mind. That image is not the reality. The reality is beyond me, but I use my imagination to reach out towards it. The image cannot give me any certainty. These thoughts became clearer as my life progressed. At this point of writing, I have discarded the image of the divine that Christianity and monotheism has given me. Looking back at this time, I am reminded of the folk tale of the emperor with no clothes. Once I lost the enchantment I felt towards this God, once I broke the spell I was under, I was like the child in the folk tale. I no longer saw a God who was deserving of worship and exaltation, but a pathetic figure, a single, patriarchal, authoritarian God in the heavens, a God removed from the earth, from nature, not married, no woman in his life, no sex life, no appreciation of intimate relationships, of family, or of community. I saw a remote, isolated, single parent who did not believe in sex. On his dictatorial male perch in the heavens, I saw a God who issued commandments that conveyed his exclusive intolerance for other deities, other perspectives, and other beliefs. My conclusion was that this God was toxic, dysfunctional, and out of date. This image of the divine is no longer useful for me on my spiritual journey. I can't find wisdom or inspiration there. God is a word I try to avoid in my conversations. Other words are acceptable, sometimes a whole variety. I do acknowledge a greater power in the universe. That greater power upholds and directs me. I experience it as a sense of mystery and wonder. But to me, it is unknown and unknowable. It cannot be named. The Chinese Tao Te Ching begins, "The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao." The same is true with naming the divine. My mind is not big enough to encompass and name this mystery. Believing that I have a name for it is foolish. I acknowledge my limits as a human. Life is more than I will ever understand. There are aspects of my life far beyond my ability to comprehend. What I can talk about is my experience. When I feel this sense of presence, I can talk about it. When I experience wonder or awe, this is something real for me. I can share my experiences with others and find a vocabulary that resonates. How should we talk about what we can only imagine? If I let it, my imagination can ignite with new images. What is this presence? Shall we call it the sacred, the divine? Or will we use the term the universe? A new vocabulary is emerging. We are reimagining the divine. There will be no definitive word, but there can be many general words. As the title of Joseph Campbell's book suggests, it has 1,000 faces. At this moment in time, most of the world still believes in God. This is God with a capital G, the identifiable and historic God of monotheism. God is invoked almost everywhere, in regular conversation, songs and anthems, courts and parliaments, and even in the inauguration of the President of the United States. Historically, this God is the same for Jews, Christians, Muslims, Baha'is, Rastafarians, and some others. People worship him in synagogues, mosques, cathedrals, churches, and temples. His origins go back to Abraham, a key figure in the Hebrew Bible. Abraham's belief in this God marks the beginnings of the Jewish religion, Judaism. All monotheist religions practiced today, belief in one God only, are Abrahamic religions, in that they trace their roots back to this God of Abraham. When all of the followers of Abrahamic religions are combined, they make up 54% of the world's population. The common element of their belief systems is this one God. Together, they represent monotheism as we know it. Polytheism, in contrast, is a belief in a community of deities. In the past, each polytheistic culture had its own particular set of unique deities. Gods and goddesses belonged to a pantheon unique to a tribe or culture. Every culture was different. Before the dominance of monotheism, polytheism was the norm among indigenous peoples and ancient cultures. Some polytheistic cultures still exist today, but monotheism has taken over from most of them. Why do the majority of people in the world today believe in the monotheist Abrahamic God? The answer lies in the history of globalization. The origins of the globalization we know today can be traced back to the 4th century CE. At that time, the Roman Church conceived a vision of building a Holy Roman Empire. That empire would spread throughout the world, with God at its centre. From then on, people throughout the world were encouraged, evangelized, and sometimes forced to convert to monotheism. Christianity first, and later Islam and others, used political means, including wars and invasions, to spread their religion. Politics and religion are closely intertwined in the history of the development of our modern world. What makes monotheism so different from polytheism is that it is prescriptive. In monotheism, there are commandments. Humans are told what to believe and how to behave. Wavering from those beliefs or from that behaviour can bring condemnation and punishment. It is within monotheism that we find words like orthodoxy and heresy. Orthodoxy means right teaching, in other words, the official teaching of that church or religion. Heresy means being unorthodox, having contrary beliefs that get one into trouble. In polytheism, despite its many forms, there is no evidence that I am aware of prescription or commandments. Polytheism did not work that way. The gods were not authority figures issuing commandments. For the most part, these deities were the manifestations of powers greater than human powers that influenced various aspects of human life. In the Celtic tradition, for example, They represented the elements: earth, air, fire, and water, the weather, the seasons, fertility and harvest, and so on. They were respected and acknowledged, worshipped, and sacrificed to. Sometimes they needed to be appeased or pleaded with, other times avoided. But obedience was not a requirement. Does it matter that the monotheist God is so dominant in today's world? To answer that question, we need to look at how that idea and narrative shapes and has shaped our thinking. When I was young, I made a fundamental option to believe in this God. That decision set me on a certain path. It shaped my life definitively. The world today has made a similar option, perhaps by default, but nonetheless an option that has shaped today's thinking on many matters. Planet Earth today is dominated by humans. It's not just that we are present in such large numbers, 7.9 billion according to the latest count. It is also that our way of living on this earth has had a negative impact on practically everything else. All other living species, and even the climate. How we impact this planet on which we live is the result of how we think, or don't think, about these things. Now that I am older, I care about my waste and where I dispose of it. In the past, I didn't care that much. Even today, there are some that don't care. I see the occasional empty beer can or plastic water bottle thrown in the ditch. Our thinking affects our behaviour, and that behaviour affects our environment. How we think matters. Human thinking is layered like an onion. At the centre of the onion, close to our hearts, are our thoughts for people, the people nearest to us, our families and friends. Love for these motivates our behaviour. Outside that layer are our thoughts concerning the wider world: school, work, entertainment, travel, and society in general. In this layer, our thoughts revolve around everything we do and everything that happens in the world. Our behaviours and responses are the result of our ideas and understandings, our priorities, and our personal goals. But outside that layer again are the macro ideas of the world we live in. These macro ideas shape how we think too. Capitalism and communism, for example, are both macro ideas. The major systems of the world, such as education, economics, health, transport, the media, including now social media, all shape how we think. The religions of this world are also macro ideas. They are in a layer even further out on the onion than the systems of the world. Religious ideas greatly influence how we live and behave on this planet. They wrap and envelop everything else that we think and do. They give our lives shape and meaning. I call this outer envelope the mythical container of our lives. It is this outer layer of our thinking that most shapes the world we have created. That layer is now dominated by monotheism. Monotheism is the single most influential idea that has shaped our world over the last 2 millennia.
Old friends. The devil sits facing God with a bone to pick. You drove me to it, you know, he says. Huh? God looks tired and bleak, worn out with too much light. An aging pair, friends again after a long estrangement. Did I? God says vaguely. I was just doing my best. He pauses. I'm glad it's over. The devil pats him on the knee kindly and nods in agreement.